Alright, welcome back everybody to Buzzed Out Videos, and as I mentioned in a previous video, this channel is going to have two main thrusts to it, I should say. The main thrust of this channel is going to be BioBowl videos, BioBowl stats, and BioBowl related topics. For a while that's going to be the series I've recently started about the BioBowl round robins, but the other side is a little more random. It's probably mostly going to be politics based though, and that's what this first video is going to be about. So I figured I would do, to get myself started on this and to just start making content until I feel more comfortable making good content, I'm going to start with something that I, and probably you, are relatively familiar with, which is American politics. And to do that, I'm going to start with a short series doing the main political parties in the United States, and I decided I would start with the one that has the largest membership, which is, as I'm sure you are aware, the Democratic Party. So yeah, the Democratic Party has the largest membership. That makes sense considering that they got the largest percentage of the popular vote last time, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So we'll start with just the, some of the symbols and colors and stuff like that of the Democratic Party. As you can see, the Democratic Party is the party with the blue identifying color. The Republicans are the red. Those actually used to be switched a few years ago, but that doesn't really matter a whole lot. Based on that blue, the official Democratic symbol is this thing in the upper left-hand corner, the blue D and a white circle inside of a blue circle. That's the official party logo. And over here you have the very iconic donkey logo that, surprisingly enough, is not the official logo, but it's merely a more identifiable one, I should say. Now, some quick facts of the Democratic Party. The Democrats were founded in 1828, which makes them the longest running political party in the world, the oldest political party in the world. That actually surprised me a lot, but no other political party that's running today has been around as long as the Democrats, almost 200 years. The Democrats were founded by followers of Andrew Jackson. The Democrats have changed a lot since then, but they've still been around for a long time. The last Democratic president was the leader of the country from 2008 to 2017, 2009 to 2017. Barack Obama, right here, as I'm sure you are aware. The Democrats control a majority of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, as you can see in this graph, with the blue being the Democrats, the red being the Republicans, and white being independents, most of whom either coalesce with one side or the other. And yeah, so the Democrats have a slim majority there. They do however, they have a minority in the Senate with only 45 seats, plus 2 independents that are basically Democrats. The House of Representatives is currently controlled by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who would be the closest thing the United States has to a prime minister, but obviously we have a president that controls most of the functions that a prime minister would normally perform in other countries, and this is America, we don't have prime ministers. So the Democrats also control 24 state governorships and 47% of seats in House and state legislatures, I should say. So just under half. The Democrats are the largest party in the United States by party membership. They have over 80 million, I should say, registered Democrats, which is weird because only like 65 million showed up to vote at the last election. So I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, in the most recent presidential election, the Democratic Party ticket was decided in a primary season, mostly between two contenders, Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady and Secretary of State, and Bernie Sanders, the technically independent senator from Vermont. It's a very close race that Hillary Clinton eventually won. She later went on to pick Tim Kaine as her running mate, her vice presidential candidate, for the 2016 election. And here are some of their logos up here. I'm with her with the H replaced by this symbol was a pretty common electoral symbol. This ticket was widely considered to be the favorite to win the 2016 election, but as you all know, Donald Trump was the one who actually came out on top, the Republican nominee, winning all the states in red while Clinton won all the states in blue. Democrats it was widely considered to be an underperformance by the Democrats, and came as a shock to basically everyone. The Democrats won 229 of the electoral votes, which is a lot lower than the 270 needed to win. 227 of those were won by Clinton, 1 from Hawaii by Bernie Sanders, and 1 from Washington by Faith Spotted Eagle, who actually didn't win any popular votes, just the 1 electoral vote, so make of that what you will. That obviously due to faithless electors, something I may explain in a future video. Okay, so now to Democratic policy positions. So if you ask a Democrat what their basic political ideology is, they'll probably answer that they're either a liberal or democratic socialist. So a liberal, by the strictest definition of the word, basically means the same thing as libertarian, right? The founding fathers were classical liberals, they're called. Basically someone who believes in civil liberties and economic liberties and such. I don't like this label very much because it doesn't really apply to much of anyone in politics right now, especially in the Democratic Party. The label I usually prefer to use is leftism. Leftism is the political ideology that is more economically left-wing or socialist, I should say, and more socially left-wing, which usually involves what they would call civil liberties, but that I generally oppose, as I'll explain in my non-economic issues section. The other one they'll often use is democratic socialism, largely espoused by candidates such as Bernie Sanders, and to a lesser extent Elizabeth Warren. But socialism, obviously the belief that the government should control a lot more of the economy than it already does, which, as I'm sure you probably have guessed, I'm not too big of a fan of, and the Democratic part is just thrown in there to make the socialism seem more legitimate, in my opinion, or to seem more legitimate. So yeah, now some more specific policy points. Those were more broad generalizations. A lot of Democrats wouldn't agree with those terms to describe them, but probably most of them would agree with that one of those three describes them. And yeah, so on economic issues, most Democrats are either welfare statist or democratic socialist, and I already explained what democratic socialist means. But a welfare statist, what that means is they believe in the expansion of the welfare state, which is a broad term usually meant to include entitlement programs like food stamps and other programs like healthcare, basically redistributing wealth, taxing the rich at higher rates and redistributing them to poor or groups that are perceived to be underprivileged. And yeah, pretty much all Democrats either at least agree that we should keep the current level of the welfare state, if not increase it drastically. Democrats generally, as I mentioned earlier, generally support higher taxes on the wealthy to finance these programs. It's believed that widely believed in the Democratic Party that since the rich have earned more, they should pay more, a higher percentage of their wealth. And I think it's possible there's an argument to be made there, but I don't really agree with that 100%. Democrats usually want to increase the government budget, and they usually increase the government budget on things like healthcare. You see candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders wanting to increase government spending on Medicare for all, or most of the other Democratic candidates at least want to expand the current Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And they also want to spend money on fighting the so-called climate crisis, which not something I'm a huge fan of, but a lot of Democrats are following. They want to follow the examples of countries like Canada and France and other countries that are apparently going out of their way to fight the climate. You see the certain Democrats advocating for things like the Green New Deal, which would basically attempt to eliminate all carbon emissions, or at least reduce them a lot. I'm not super well versed on the Green New Deal because I've considered it to kind of be pointless and terrible. But anyway, and Democrats generally are in favor of increasing government spending, but they usually do like decreasing government spending on the military, bringing troops home, or unless Donald Trump wants to bring troops home, and then they don't. But decreasing government spending there, that was a big thing with Obama. He decreased the military budget a lot, and whether or not that's a good idea, I don't have a super strong opinion on that. But anyway, non-economic issues. This is where I really, really start to disagree with the Democrats, as you will see. So pretty much all Democrats are very radically pro-abortion, or pro-choice as they prefer to call themselves. Yeah, I'm a very strong pro-life advocate, and I'm sure most of you would probably agree with me based on where I was advertising this channel. But yeah, so Democrats are obviously coming out in support of Roe v. Wade and eliminating the Hyde Amendment, which prevents government funding for paying for abortions. They want to fund Planned Parenthood, and yeah, abortion is one of the essential issues that the Democratic Party allies behind, and it's kind of frightening, to be honest. Also, Democrats are very much in favor of the expansion of LGBT plus rights, and I have to put the plus because the letters keep increasing all the time. But yeah, the sexual revolution is very important for the Democrats. They want to, you probably saw that case in Colorado where the man, I believe his name was Jack, who refused to bake a cake for a gay wedding, and it caused this big hubbub because the Democrats wanted to ban him or something. And that's a real thing. Like, Democrats violently oppose anyone who dares to oppose the sexual revolution. And yeah, obviously not something I'm a huge fan of, but that's what Democrats in general support. One of the most important Democratic candidates this election, Pete Buttigieg, is openly gay and very proud of it. And pretty much all the other Democratic candidates really like to come out in support of that as well. Another thing Democrats have come in, another really radical position a lot of Democrats have advocated for recently is open borders, at least on the southern border with Mexico. A lot of Democrats have advocated for decriminalizing border crossings, which would no longer make it a crime to come into the country illegally, which is kind of an oxymoron because doing something illegal kind of, like, that's what a crime is, right? But so that's a big thing a lot of Democrats advocate for. You know, of course, that Trump wants to build a wall. Democrats do not like that, and whether or not that's because they want more voters is for you to decide, I suppose. So this one, no Democrat would ever agree that they were anti-religious freedom, but there are a lot of cases. I mentioned the earlier case where a baker in Colorado refused to bake a cake for a gay wedding. Democrats are cracking down on the ability of people to express their religion. There was attempts to tear down the cross at the Arlington, tear down crosses at, like, in government places. I think one was in the Arlington National Cemetery. Yeah, they like to classify religious speech as hate speech and try to shut it down, which obviously is very bad. On that same note, Democrats are often in favor of hate speech laws, which usually means if something is considered to be hateful speech, they want to ban it. And the definition of hate speech can change, but you'll see a lot of Democrats arguing for that we should follow the example of certain European countries and ban hate speech. And yeah, so obviously, as you can probably tell by what I was saying as I went through these Democratic policy positions, I do not like the Democratic Party, and I'm sure most of you don't either, but these are just basic positions that most Democratic candidates would be in support of. And if feel free to leave it in the comments if I've got some of these wrong or missed something important that I should have put in here. Alright, so which groups support the Democrats? So the Democratic agenda often appeals to, like, if you look at this graph, basically you see in a lot of areas, blue is obviously the Democrats, people of color or non-white people, Democrats have a lot of support in, they won every state. They also have a lot more higher support among women than among men. People of color more than white people. So yeah, that people, women and Latinos and African Americans and millennials tend to be the groups that support the Democratic Party in larger numbers, especially African Americans, where the number is like 90 to 10 or something like that. Also, as you can see from this county level map of the 2016 election, Democrats have a lot more support in coastal areas, like along the West Coast and along the East Coast. They also have big support in cities, like you see this blue area in Chicago, around the Denver area, Seattle, New York, Washington, D.C. especially, and up in this big these metropolitan areas along the coast. Also, they have a lot more support. They also have support near the Mexican border, which makes sense as Latinos are big supporters of the Democratic Party. Not as big as African Americans, though, who in African American dominated areas in the South, even in deep red states, you see a lot of blue there in those deep red states from African American populations. Alright, so the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. Obviously, the 2020 after the loss in 2016, there's been a big clamor for who will be the 2020 Democratic presidential nominee. You've no doubt heard a lot about this. I'm going to briefly explain some of the more important candidates. Joe Biden, obviously the former vice president. I think he'll probably end up being the nominee just because he's been the front runner for so long. Even though he's sustained a lot of attacks, he's always been up there. A lot of that's just due to his high name recognition and popularity among African American voters, who are a pretty solid base in the Democratic Party. To be honest, there just aren't a lot of African American candidates running. I think the only one on this list is Cory Booker, and Joe Biden was obviously the vice president for our first African American president, so he has a lot of support among that group. Oh, Wayne Messam, of course, but he has like 4 people who support him. So, Michael Bennet, I don't really know a whole lot about him. I'm pretty sure he's still in the race, but he's not doing very well. Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, he dropped out recently. Cory Booker's still plugging along at about 2%. He has no chance of winning the nomination. Steve Bullock is the governor of Montana, which you would think would make him relatively popular, right? He's a Democratic candidate who could win in one of the deepest red states, right? You'd think Democrats would be clamoring for him to beat President Trump. You'd think he'd be the most electable candidate. And I think that's his pitch, but he just doesn't have high enough name recognition. Pete Buttigieg is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He is very young. He's only like 37, which is part of his appeal. He's also openly gay, and which in the Democratic Party is giving him a lot of appeal. Julian Castro was the former Housing and Urban Development Secretary in President Obama's cabinet. He was also the mayor of San Antonio. That's what it was. He's probably going to drop out really soon, though, because he's apparently really low on finances. John Delaney, he has been in the race since like the middle of 2017, longer than any other candidate, but he has no chance. Tulsi Gabbard is she's from Hawaii. She's Hindu. She's got a lot of press recently for her brief feud with Hillary Clinton. She's one of the more interesting candidates, given her interesting positions on foreign policy and such. She's actually a veteran, which I obviously respect and admire very much, but she's probably not going to win the nomination. Kirsten Gillibrand dropped out really a few months ago. I believe she's a senator. Kamala Harris is a senator from California. She's also African American. I forgot to mention that earlier when talking about Joe Biden. This is probably the second highest support among African American voters, though, and she has a lot of appeal in California, obviously, because that's where she's from, so she'll probably stay around for a while. I believe she's 5th in the polls. John Hickenlooper, he's dropped out. I think he's from Colorado. Jay Inslee, I'm pretty sure he's dropped out. Amy Klobuchar, senator from Massachusetts, she's plugging along at 7th or 8th in the polls. Wayne Messam is a mayor of a city in Florida. He literally has 0.0% of support of the Democratic Party, so he's not going anywhere. Seth Moulton, he's definitely dropped out. Beto O'Rourke, who famously said he was hell yes going to take your AR-15 and take away your church's tax exempt status. Definitely my favorite candidate of the bunch. He dropped out a few days ago. Tim Ryan, he's dropped out. Everyone's favorite Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders from Vermont, who's technically not even a Democrat, so I find that pretty interesting. I mean, he is in terms of policy in like every sense of the word. He's just not technically a Democrat. He has a pretty good, solid chance of winning the nomination. He has a lot of support, especially after barely losing to Hillary Clinton last time in an election that a lot of Democrats thought was fraudulent in favor of Hillary Clinton. So he has a lot of support. He could probably pull it off. Eric Swalwell, I'm pretty sure he dropped out. Elizabeth Warren, she's highest in the betting odds right now after her quick rise. She is trying to model herself as Bernie Sanders, but like more principled and more, I have a plan for that. It's one of her biggest slogans, but her plans are terrible, to put the matter quite bluntly. And I don't think, I mean, she is second in the polls, so she's and she has the media on her side, so she has a high chance of winning the nomination. I personally think it's going to be Biden or maybe Sanders, but we'll see how that goes. Marianne Williamson she's written a lot of self-help books apparently. She's been described as a spiritual guru. Apparently she's really interesting, but to like in her books and in listening to her speak, but I don't know enough about her, and she isn't going anywhere. And last but not least, Andrew Yang, who has been in the race for a long time as well. He is not a politician, but and I think he's trying to ride the same kind of wave that got Donald Trump into office. He has a lot of really interesting policy proposals, and if I had to pick a Democrat, I would probably pick him, even though I don't agree with him on like 60% of stuff. But yeah, he will. I think he's 6th in the polls, which is respectable given the 16-something Democratic field. I mean, most of these people, a lot of these people have dropped out, so there's only like 16 people left. But yeah, so yeah, those are the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. And yeah, that's my just quick run through of the United States Democratic Party. Let me know in the comments if you have any other ideas for videos I should do or ways I could have improved this one. Like this video if you did like it, and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And yeah, I'll post another video, episode 2 of the Bible on a Map series in a couple of days. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.